The first real sign of trouble was a brand new luxury car. It sat parked in my parents' driveway on their 40th anniversary. They were retired teachers who always bought reliable 10-year-old sedans. This was a machine that cost more than their first two houses combined. My name is Mark, and I am a 48-year-old senior accountant. My mind automatically calculated the monthly payment and insurance costs. Their combined pensions could never support that kind of financial burden. I felt a knot of professional skepticism tighten deep in my stomach. My father deflected my questions with a vague story about a great deal. My mother just smiled weakly and called it their little retirement present. Dinner was a quiet affair in the small house where I grew up. Every plate and fork felt familiar, but the air was thick with unspoken words. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she cleared away the dishes. She seemed smaller than I remembered, somehow lost in her own kitchen. They spoke about the weather and complained about the noisy new neighbors. It was a strained performance of normalcy for my benefit, and we all knew it. After dinner, my father insisted on showing me their little antique shop. He had a manic energy I had not seen in him for years. We walked across the damp lawn to the converted garage in the backyard. He fumbled for a moment with a new set of shiny keys. The old wooden door had been replaced with a reinforced steel one. Inside, the familiar smell of old wood was mixed with the faint scent of ozone. Two sleek black monitors glowed on a desk among shelves of forgotten books. A commercial-grade security camera blinked from a corner near the ceiling. He proudly demonstrated the new point-of-sale system with a grand flourish. He talked about market trends and online sales with unearned confidence. His vocabulary sounded borrowed from some cheap business self-help seminar. He really wanted me to see the recent boom in their business. He pulled up the sales ledger for me on the bright, oversized screen. I watched as he scrolled through weeks of daily sales reports. The screen showed thousands of dollars in cash sales recorded every single day. The descriptions listed worthless items like porcelain dolls and faded city postcards. I saw one entry for $500 for a single chipped teacup. Another entry showed $1,000 for a box of rusty army medals. The numbers were too clean and too consistent to be real. It was the kind of perfect bookkeeping designed to conceal, not to clarify. My father looked at the screen with the misplaced pride of a true salesman. He looked like a stranger wearing my father's face as a mask. He was playing a dangerous role he did not seem to understand at all. I felt a profound coldness spread through my chest in that dusty shop. It was the chilling feeling of watching someone you love drowning slowly, and you were just standing there on the distant and silent shore. I drove home from that anniversary dinner in a state of quiet shock. The 2-hour drive was a blur of highway lights and mumbled excuses. My mind kept trying to build a logical narrative for my parents. Maybe they sold some old family heirlooms they never told me about. Perhaps my father's pension had some strange, forgotten investment clause. I am a man who builds his entire world on verifiable facts. I tried to dismiss my own feelings as some kind of midlife anxiety. I wanted to believe they were just enjoying a lucky and well-deserved retirement. I thought back to when they first opened the little shop 3 years ago. I had spent a weekend helping them paint the walls a cheerful yellow. My father was so excited about his little hobby to keep him busy. My mother arranged the dusty trinkets on the shelves with loving care. They were happy with a few $100s of sales each week. That memory felt like a lifetime ago from a completely different world. Then I remembered the family vacation we took to Florida last year. My father paid for the whole thing with a thick envelope of cash. He said he just did not trust credit card companies with big purchases. I felt a small, sharp sting of suspicion in that travel agent's office, but I ignored it because my kids were so excited about the trip. I chose to see it as generosity instead of a bright red flag. I also recalled overhearing a phone call a few months before that. My father was in his study with the door almost closed. His voice was low and hard, unlike the gentle tone he always used. He said something about a delivery being late and unacceptable consequences. When I asked him about it, he just said he was handling a difficult supplier. I accepted his answer because questioning it felt like a betrayal. All these separate memories were now connecting into a dark and coherent pattern. My parents' lives had become a financial ledger I was too afraid to audit. The need for a logical explanation consumed me for an entire week. My work suffered as I replayed every odd memory in my mind. Finally, I decided to do something that felt like a deep betrayal. I called my father with a carefully constructed lie about a new tax law. I offered to look over their shop's quarterly finances for them. I told him it was just to make sure they were protected. He agreed to my offer a little too quickly, with obvious relief in his voice. He gave me the remote login credentials for the shop's main computer. He said it would be easier than me driving all the way out there. For 2 nights, I sat in my own silent home office after my family was asleep. I meticulously went through the official bookkeeping software they used. Everything was perfect on the surface, almost too perfect for a small business. The revenue numbers matched the impossibly high sales I had seen. The expenses were all properly categorized, but they were suspiciously low. It was a clean, well-maintained fiction designed to pass a cursory inspection. I knew there had to be another set of records somewhere else. On the 3rd night, I started searching the computer's entire hard drive. I looked for hidden files or documents with misleading names. I found a file named Old Family Recipes, buried deep in a system folder. It was a password-protected spreadsheet, which was an unusual format for recipes. My heart pounded as I started guessing at the password. I tried their anniversary, my birthday, and the names of old family pets. Nothing worked until I tried my mother's maiden name followed by her birth year. The spreadsheet clicked open, revealing a nightmare in orderly columns. It was a detailed ledger of huge cash infusions from a single source. That money was then distributed in smaller, specific amounts to other accounts. The columns had coded headings like shipment fees, consulting, and disposals. I had seen spreadsheets exactly like this one in fraud cases at work. This was the operational blueprint of a money laundering scheme. In that moment, I saw the unadorned and ugly truth on my screen. My parents were not naive victims of some cruel misunderstanding. They were the willing operators of a calculated criminal enterprise. I drove to my parents' house the next morning without calling first. The spreadsheet was on a small flash drive in my pocket. It felt like a cold, heavy stone against my leg during the entire trip. I found them in the kitchen reading the Sunday paper like any other weekend. The scene was so painfully normal that I almost turned around and left. I sat down at the familiar kitchen table and told them what I had found. I tried to keep my voice steady and professional like I was in a meeting. I explained the structure of the ledger and the meaning of the transactions. My father listened with a tight, unreadable expression on his face. When I finished, he let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. He told me that I was letting my stressful job make me paranoid. He said their business involved private investors with complicated financial needs. He called the spreadsheet a simple record for their own private accounting. He accused me of snooping and betraying his trust in a hurtful way. His anger was a shield, and he used it to make me feel small and foolish. My mother sat there silently through his entire speech. She just looked at me with wide, pleading eyes full of deep disappointment. She said they had only ever wanted to build a better life for us all. She told me this stress was not good for my father's weak heart. She made me feel like I was the one causing all of the damage here. They presented a united front of denial and wounded indignation. I had walked into that kitchen with cold, hard evidence in my hand. They made me feel like I was some kind of cruel prosecutor. I started to doubt what I had seen with my own 2 eyes. Their gaslighting was so effective that it made me question my own sanity. I had no more arguments left inside of me to give them. I left their house feeling more alone and confused than ever before. I walked out feeling like I was the guilty party in this whole affair. For a few weeks, I tried to pretend that nothing had happened. I buried myself in my work and focused on my own family. The silence between me and my parents was a heavy, unspoken agreement. I told myself that I had overreacted to their creative bookkeeping. It was easier to believe I was wrong than to accept the alternative. My mother's birthday forced me to break the suffocating silence between us. I drove out to their house with a gift and a heart full of dread. The tension in the air was so thick I could barely breathe. We were all playing our parts in a fragile truce, avoiding eye contact. A car I did not recognize pulled into the driveway while I was there. A man in an expensive suit got out and walked to the door. He was not a neighbor or a friend. He was something else entirely. He had cold, empty eyes and a stillness that was deeply unsettling. He nodded at my father and completely ignored my mother and me. My father's face went pale as he led the man into his study. They closed the door, but I could hear the low murmur of their voices. My father's tone was deferential and full of anxious energy. The other man's voice was calm, quiet, and absolutely menacing. I could only make out a few words like unacceptable and significant discrepancy. It was not a conversation between two business partners. It was the sound of an employee being reprimanded by his superior. While they talked, I watched my mother across the living room. She was twisting a napkin in her hands, her knuckles completely white. Her performance of normalcy was gone, replaced by raw, undisguised terror. After the man left, the house felt colder and much smaller. Later, I heard my mother crying softly on the telephone. She was telling my father that there was a serious shortfall this month. She said that these were not patient people they were dealing with. My self-doubt vanished, replaced by a cold wave of certainty. My parents were not the masterminds of some clever financial scheme. They were just two old people who were trapped in a cage, and I finally understood that they were in incredible immediate danger. The fear for my parents' safety became a constant low hum of anxiety. I felt like I was watching them from behind a thick wall of glass. I could see the danger, but I was completely powerless to stop it. I tried to maintain a normal life for my wife and children, but I was distracted at work and distant at home every night. The turning point came on a Tuesday evening after I got home from work. I saw the splintered wood of my front door frame from the driveway. My wife was in the living room talking to two police officers. Someone had broken into our house in the middle of the day. A feeling of icy violation washed over me as I walked through our home. I checked the valuables first, expecting the worst possible outcome. The television was still on the wall, and my wife's jewelry was untouched. The emergency cash we kept in a desk drawer was still there. The only thing missing from the entire house was my personal laptop. It had been taken from my desk in my small home office. I knew in that instant that this was not a random burglary. This was a direct and unambiguous message meant only for me. The laptop was the one I used to discover their secret ledger. They knew that I had a copy of their incriminating files. The danger was no longer just their problem, it was now my problem too. My fear curdled into a cold, sharp anger that burned away all confusion. I drove to their antique shop that night without even calling them. I walked in and found them counting cash at the front counter. I told them about the break-in and my stolen personal laptop. I told them their lies had now put my own family at risk. There was no room for negotiation or excuses in my voice. I demanded they tell me the entire truth from the very beginning. They looked at each other, and I saw the truth in their shared glance. The whole sordid, ugly story was about to come out at last. We stood in the cold silence of the dusty antique shop. My father finally sat down on a stool, looking utterly defeated. He told me the whole story in a quiet, broken monologue. It started with a small loan to help them buy initial inventory. The loan came from a successful former student he had once taught. When they struggled to make the high interest payments, the student offered a solution. He proposed they could use the shop to process some cash transactions. He had told them it was a simple way to help a friend avoid taxes. It started with small amounts, but the numbers grew every month. They were seduced by the percentage they were allowed to keep. That money paid for their new car and their expensive vacations. They told themselves that what they were doing was a victimless crime. They convinced themselves that they were in complete control of the situation, but that control was an illusion that had shattered recently. The man in the suit was not a friend or a business partner. He was an enforcer for the real people in charge of the money. My parents had made a serious mistake with a recent transaction. Now they were on the hook for a massive shortfall they could not repay. My father spoke with the hollow shame of a man confessing his sins. My mother's reaction was entirely different, much more practical. She grabbed my arm with a surprising amount of strength. She begged me to walk away and forget everything I had heard. She said I had to protect my own wife and my own children. She wanted me to leave them to face their consequences all alone. I listened to their confession and felt an icy calm wash over me. The people in front of me were not the parents I had known. They were strangers who had traded their integrity for a comfortable life. Our family bond did not just break in that moment. I realized it had been a fragile and expensive lie all along. I left the shop without another word to my parents. My mother's desperate pleas to run and hide were naive and useless. The break-in at my house was proof that I was already involved. These people knew my name, my address, and the face of my wife. Walking away would just make me a loose end they would eventually tie up. I drove to my office in the empty downtown district that night. I needed a sterile, logical environment away from the emotional ruin of my family. I sat in the dark and realized the police were not an option. A messy investigation would put us all in more danger before it ever led to safety. My parents' problem had become a tumor that was now attached to me. The only solution was to perform the surgery on my own terms. My goal was no longer about understanding their moral failure as people. That part of my life was over, and grief was a luxury I could not afford. My only goal now was the complete survival of my own family. The next day, I bought a new laptop with cash from a store across town. I began working from public libraries and anonymous coffee shop networks. I used my professional skills to become a forensic accountant for their crimes. I remotely accessed their shop's computer from a secure connection. I started tracing the flow of money with a cold and methodical precision. I downloaded every transaction and began building a map of their entire operation. I created encrypted files to store all of the data I had gathered. I was not trying to save my parents from their terrible mistakes. I was building a weapon to save myself from the deadly consequences. My grief had been replaced by a quiet and meticulous resolve. It was finally time to stop being the victim in this story. I spent the next few weeks living a strange double life. By day, I was a normal accountant and a suburban father. By night, I was mapping the financial arteries of a criminal enterprise. My parents started calling me in a state of escalating panic. They told me that their contacts were getting nervous and asking questions. Their handler accused them of being careless with their computer security. They begged me to stop what I was doing before I made things worse. I ignored their pleas and continued to dig deeper into the data. The warnings soon became much more direct and personal. I came out of a public library one evening to find all 4 of my car's tires had been expertly slashed. It was a clean, silent message that they knew my daily routine. A few days later, I received a call from a blocked number. A distorted electronic voice delivered a very simple, chilling instruction. It told me to stop looking into business that did not concern me. The voice mentioned the name of my children's elementary school. My blood ran cold, but my resolve turned into solid steel. They thought these acts of intimidation would make me retreat in fear, but their threats only confirmed that my quiet work was hurting them. My secret investigation had finally drawn blood from the hidden beast. I decided it was time to stop gathering intelligence and to start attacking. I took the information I had on one of their main shell corporations. I compiled it into a neat anonymous file with supporting documents. I sent it from a secure email address to a financial crime journalist. I had made my first move in a war they did not know I was fighting. I was no longer just a potential target for them to hunt down. I had finally become a hunter in my own right. The journalist's article created the precise kind of chaos I wanted. It sent a shockwave through the organization, forcing them to move money. Their frantic activity exposed new connections and deeper vulnerabilities. In the middle of their panic, I found the final piece of the puzzle. I discovered the identity of the man at the very top of the pyramid. I learned about his legitimate businesses that he used as a cover. I found the names of his wife and children and where they lived. This information was the ultimate form of leverage against a man like him. I considered sending everything to the authorities or to the journalist, but those options were messy and would not guarantee my family's safety. A public takedown could lead to unpredictable and violent retaliation. I needed a solution that was quiet, final, and absolutely guaranteed. My research had also identified their main rivals in the city. I realized only one monster could truly eliminate another one completely. I made the cold and calculated decision to arrange a hostile takeover. I sent an anonymous encrypted message to the rival organization. My offer was simple and direct, laid out in business-like terms. I would give them everything I had on their competition. This included the kingpin's identity, account numbers, and delivery routes. In exchange, they would guarantee the permanent safety of my entire family. I received a one-word reply confirming the deal had been accepted. I transferred the data package, a digital bomb that would erase them. I did not bring a criminal enterprise to justice that day. I had simply arranged for a bloody and efficient change in management. My family was finally safe, but I had sold my soul to achieve it. It was a price I was willing to pay without a moment's hesitation. The old criminal organization disappeared without a sound or a trace. There were no news reports and no police investigations into their absence. One day the threat was there, and the next day it was completely gone. The silence was the only confirmation I ever received that my plan had worked. I helped my parents sell their house and the now empty antique shop. I moved them to a quiet retirement community in a different state. They are financially secure and physically safe from any harm now, but our relationship is a cold and empty ruin of what it once was. When I visit them, they look at me with a mixture of gratitude and fear. They know I saved them, but they do not know the man who did it. I am no longer their son. I am their quiet, capable, and terrifying protector. I also moved my own family 1,000 miles away from our old home. I took a new job and bought a bigger house in a better neighborhood. My wife thinks we moved for a better career opportunity for me, but she sometimes looks at me with a sad, confused expression. She knows the man she married somehow got lost along the way. I go through the motions of a normal life as a husband and a father. I provide my family with a perfect picture of suburban safety, but I feel a profound emptiness inside of me, a complete void. I won the war for my family's survival, but I lost myself in the process. My children's laughter is the direct result of a silent, bloody war. They are safe because their father learned how to become a monster, and that is a brutal truth I will live with in the silence forever. If you enjoyed this video, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your reaction helps me create new stories.